Hi everyone and welcome back to the fantasyfootballfix.com YouTube channel with me, Tom Campbell, for the first instalment of the Elite Team Reveals. And I'm super excited to say we've got a new guest on this week. So we've got Andrew Neave. He's coming at us from his native South Africa and he's a Man United fan. We're going to see how he's got on in Game Week 1, how he's preparing as we look ahead to Game Week 2. Timestamps are on the video, guys, so if you do want to hop around, by all means do so. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the first Elite Team Reveal of the season. And it's been a long time coming, hasn't it, guys? We've all done our preparation, but I am so excited to say we've actually had some football now. And Game Week 1 is largely in the books. We are recording as ever on Sunday night after the final game of the Sunday round of fixtures. And I'm super excited to welcome on board, I should say, to the fantasyfootballfix.com YouTube channel, Andrew Neave. Andrew, welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
Thanks very much, Tom. I'm okay. I mean, I'm as okay as a fantasy manager can be. We can always have a better weekend, but the accent's from South Africa. I'm actually sitting here in London. Funny enough, I'm actually looking out the window at the top of Stamford Bridge right in the distance. So,
oh, man. Okay.
Did manage to catch a little bit of that game, and yeah, I'm sure we'll chat about it later, but
we absolutely will.
Chilwell.
Yeah, we absolutely will talk about the Stamford Bridge game. I'm sitting here as a Ben Chilwell owner, as you just mentioned. You and I were talking off camera. I say talking, I was whinging. So if our viewers are Ben Chilwell owners, then they will know what I was going through with that marginal offside goal. But we will get into the specifics of Game Week 1. But Andrew, it's so cool to have you on board, mate. We're just looking at the stats on screen here in terms of the amazing finishes that you've achieved over the time that you've been playing FPL. Do you want to just give a quick introduction to the guys as to how long you've been playing and kind of how you go about stylistically managing your team? Is there anything specifically that you look to do, and what's your kind of secret in securing this historic success?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. I've been playing for about 11 or 12 seasons now, and I think my style is quite boring somewhat. It's really just, I think the obvious move is the best move, if that makes any sense. So if anything just seems completely obvious, that's who I jump on. Yeah. I think you don't need to be different every single game week. It's only every now and then, and at the end of the season, really, and using your chips and planning properly at the end of the season, that has got me those ranks. So, and as you can see on the screen there, there's 7 top 10K finishes now. And when I haven't had those, I've had seasons where I was probably around the 150,000 mark, and I've tried to adapt in the last 5 or so seasons to make sure that I'm not being so stubborn.
Right.
Those seasons where I haven't done so well are the ones where I've refused to jump on bandwagons, where I thought there's no ways that they're going to continue doing that. The Leicester seasons where I don't think I ever really owned Mahrez or Vardy or Yaya Torres or the Aaron Ramsey season.
Good times, man. Good times.
Those sort of 5.5 mids that I'm just like, nah, they can't continue doing that. And that's what I've made sure I've stopped doing over the last few seasons, and that's where I've really managed to make massive gains and being as adaptable as I can.
Fascinating answer. It really is. And actually having, spoken to so many of the other elite managers as part of last season's series as well, it's really actually quite consistent with certainly the majority. I wouldn't say necessarily everybody, but certainly the vast majority do talk to that management style, Andrew. So yeah, maybe there's something for us all to learn, guys, there in terms of the simplicity of the game. And maybe we do tend to overcomplicate things. Certainly, I know, speaking from personal experience, I've certainly been guilty of that in recent seasons. But looking at that, Andrew, so around 11 seasons and 7 of them in the top 10K is truly extraordinary. So good on you. And I'm sure we'll do our best to get you there once again in this season. So we've been a little bit mean here, Andrew. We have updated the rank already, and it is prior to the game week concluding, guys. So don't pay too much attention to overall rank at this stage, particularly mid-game week. And of course, all chips are available. I say all chips are available, actually, Andrew, just before we start looking at your Game Week 1 team and talk to you about how you came to arrive at that team. I did see some noise on social media around potentially using the bench boost chip for game week 1. Was that something that entered your thoughts at all? Is that something that you've ever even remotely considered, or is that just a little bit too avant-garde for you? What do you think?
No. I think my biggest rises and the biggest gains come in the second half of the season. I've tended to be a slow starter actually, and I want as many of those chips in that second half of the season to be able to plan properly. That's really when I kind of start doing the research and start making sure that I can, get that one up on those players that don't perhaps give it as much attention at the back end of the season.
Yeah.
So a bench boost game 1, just not something I've ever considered, to be perfectly honest with you. A wild card is something I'm quite happy to use fairly quickly.
Okay.
I think not. I don't like to use it before game week 3 and that first sort of international break. There's obviously still transfers to be made. There's still signings to be made. But quite happy to do it between 4 and 6, really. I think you've got enough information then after that first month of football and knowing what formations look like and knowing what new signings are like. So quite happy to use that quite quickly. Bench boost, though, that's going to be used in
down the stretch.
As soon after my second wild card as possible is usually the way I go with that one.
I see. And look, it'll be interesting. We'll obviously get you back on throughout the course of the season, Andrew. And I suspect, the sort of cadence we established last season, it will probably be in 3 to 4 game weeks time. So it'll be fascinating to see whether or not that first wild card chip is going to be deployed around that sort of time. So we wait and see on that one. Lots of football to be played, of course. And of course, your Man United are your team, as I mentioned. They play tomorrow evening. So, lots of things can still happen, even in game week 1. So this is super early doors, guys. But without further ado, let's move on and take a little look at how Andrew set up his game week 1 team. So, guys, we can see straight away looking at the screen here that it was the 3-5-2 formation that seemed to be quite in vogue. And I was talking to some of the elite managers who you can head over to fantasyfootballfix.com and check out the elite section there where you can actually check all of the blog thoughts and see how teams are shaping up throughout the course of the week prior to the next game week, guys. But when I was doing my research and talking to the guys prior to the season beginning, 3-5-2 did seem to be the formation of choice for the majority. And we're just going to go through these. So Onana in goal, with Turner making that move just in time to be registered happily for us fantasy managers, welcoming a 4.0 asset in. Just want to talk to you about Man United defensively, Andrew. In terms of Man United defensive coverage, they picked up, or David De Gea, I guess, picked up the Golden Glove, obviously a testament to the defensive solidarity that they showed last season. So it's a straightforward choice for Onana ahead of, say, a defensive asset in terms of an outfield player. What was your thinking there?
You know what? I don't think it was a straightforward choice, to be honest with you. I think it was more so a lack of options in that price bracket. I've always gone very cheap on the goalkeepers, as cheap as I can. We know now that 2-4 million keepers is a possibility. So who knows? Could go with 8 million total in the keepers now that we know Areola's starting. So Onana was one that I got in just simply because I wasn't too keen. I always knew I'd have Turner in just simply because he's 4 mil. I didn't want to spend the money in that position. And I wasn't too inspired by the 4.5 million options. If I had gone 4.5, it would probably have been Pickford just because of those opening fixtures for Everton. But, after, to be fair to them, Everton looked dead on for that clean sheet. But obviously quite happy now that I didn't go with that option. And look,
they managed to thrash them 1-0 in a loss, didn't they? It was a bizarre way of losing a game, wasn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. 17 clean sheets for Man United last season. I think they'll do well to do the same this season. Sure. But Onana's in there. I think United's first few games are good enough to have them there until that first wild card, and then I'll reassess essentially.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And in terms of what Onana's going to bring to the team, we know him as a ball playing goalkeeper, which seems to be mandatory now if you want to compete for the major honours, according to the what's kind of in fashion right now as well. Do you think there's a possibility for him picking up even points outside of the clean sheet ones? Or do you think there are BPS to be had there from past completion and what have you, or did that not really enter your thoughts?
It hasn't entered my thoughts too much. I think those bonus points will come in if he gets the clean
Clean
sheets.
sheets, fair enough.
I think obviously having Shaw in the defense too and his attacking abilities there, I'm sure he'll be eating up bonus points when there's clean sheets himself. So it's not something I'm banking on. No. It's the clean sheets that I'm hoping he gets. Obviously, the bonuses are just that, a bonus.
Yeah, and speaking of which, let's move us on to the defensive complement that you opted for in terms of the 3 starting. I'm really intrigued about Ake. We will talk about Gabriel, guys, and I should say at this point that as part of this video, we are going to look at potential Gabriel options. So I'll ask Andrew not to belabor that point. We'll talk about that in a standalone section a little bit later in the video in terms of if you are a Gabriel owner, like myself, like Andrew, what the kind of thought process is around that, bearing in mind that he started and then came on for a very late cameo and what was a sickening reminder of what FPL can bring to us. Thank you very much. But I am intrigued about Ake in terms of how you came about selecting him ahead of the other Man City defenders. Andrew, can you talk to us about your thought process around that?
Yeah, absolutely. Ake came in when we got information before the kickoff on Friday evening. I've always wanted a City defender. I think that this year they're going to need to shore up a little bit at the back. I think it's going to be, I could eat my words here, but I think it's going to be difficult to get as many attacking returns for them this season as they did last. And I think that I always wanted that City defender. I had Stones in there originally. Sure. But we did get word that Stones wasn't going to start. Obviously, Diaz, we got word, I think that was as early as Wednesday, Thursday. It seemed like he wasn't traveling and he wasn't going to play. So I was quite happy bringing Ake in. It's always going to be a fairly short-term pick for me, probably up until that first wild card. He did nicely for me last season.
Okay, nice.
He burnt me selling him after getting injured, and then all of a sudden came back, scored a goal. I think it was a 15-pointer, literally in the weekend I sold him. But I really like him, and I think
And
Pep's going to exactly. I think when he's fit, he tends to start. It's just whether he's going to stay fit. So I'm quite happy having him for those first 3 or 4 game weeks. And he's only 5 mil too. I'm not breaking the bank to have him in there. He allowed me to go with Foden, which, in hindsight was perhaps not as good an option as all of those 6.5s.
Yeah.
But I quite like the fact that I set up my team with certain price points, and I sort of alluded to the whole being as adaptable as possible when we first started chatting. And that's the reason why I've got that 7.5 option in there with Foden. Yeah. I like the first few fixtures for City. I think, when Foden starts, he can do very, very well. And it's easy enough for me to go down from Foden to a 6.5 that's performing, or even to Maddison, who, got himself 2 assists today, who was actually in the draft before I found out Foden had started. So those early leaks can, they're good in a sense that, you can jump on whoever it is that's starting that you liked anyway, but they can also bite you. It is just Foden and Gabriel that didn't perform for me. And unfortunately, it's every other one of those template picks that I don't have that they all came through.
They did.
Your Pedros and your Matomas and your Mbuemos and Chilwells. And so they all did well. And I think that's what's going to make the season so good and so interesting. And hopefully that means that not all of us engaged managers are sitting with the exact same team every single weekend. Because there are so many options.
There really are, aren't they? And it's hard, isn't it? It's one data point, isn't it? And if you're sitting on the wrong side of the, the options that you could have gone for and they've not returned. In just a couple of cases, it does, we're looking ahead to the midfield in a moment and you can see you've had lots of returns there and 2 still to play in a tasty looking game against Wolves tomorrow as well. So, but if you are on the wrong side of that, it's 1 game week. We shall see whether or not that's still the case in 3 or 4. So no, I hear you, and it's great to have some options around the same price point, isn't it? To look to jump onto as and when form and fixtures dictate we need to. Estupinian, obviously they didn't keep a clean sheet, but was super far advanced, wasn't he? And picked up that attacking returns. Presumably you're totally happy with him ongoing for the next several fixtures, Andrew.
He'll be staying then. I think, given how attacking he's looked, even though the fixtures do turn for them come game week 4 or so, he'll probably end up staying just simply because he does. He's one of those, defenders that you're probably not relying so much on the defensive points as you are the attacking points.
Indeed, and you were talking before, weren't we, before we started recording, about the feelings one has when they don't own these players. The Ben Chilwells, for example. I get this sense that Estupiñán could be in that same mould, bearing in mind just how advanced he was. Again, one game, home game against Luton, possibly not the most indicative sample, I would hasten to add, but based on that and the historic evidence of last season, I think that's a reasonable hold then. Let's look at the midfield, Andrew. So you've got the 5 across midfield. The Arsenal double up there, Martinelli and Saka. I was just interested, was that in your thought processes, or was that settled prior to Jesus' injury, or did you arrive at that as a consequence of Gabriel Jesus being ruled out? What was your kind of approach to the Arsenal attack in the pre-season ahead of game week 1?
I guess it was because had Jesus been fit for that game on Saturday, I probably would have gone for him. So, and I always did want a defender for those first few games for Arsenal too. Yeah. So it's quite likely that I would have just gone with Saka had Jesus been fit. Quite happy to have Martinelli though. When we knew that Jesus wasn't going to be an option, I was always going to have a double Man United, double Arsenal midfield. And it was always going to be a 3-5-2. I think going back to all of those options that we've got in midfield this season, you can chop and change between them. And again, that's why I've kind of set up with those particular guys at their price points, and I can move off any one of them quite easily if someone does start performing.
Definitely.
I mean, literally the only 2 that I won't be able to go for are Salah and KDB, who doesn't seem like he's an option at the moment anyway.
No, indeed. I mean, in terms of that, we'll talk about Phil Foden now. So we obviously got wind, if you're engaged on social media, which I'm sure the majority of the folks watching this video are, obviously got confirmation that Foden was starting. Was Foden a lock in the team even without that information, Andrew? Or were you one of the ones sort of saying, well, you've got options with as you say, James Maddison, for example, and a heap of other 7.5 or under options, I guess, more at the 6.5 million options. Was it just that confirmation of the early team sheet against Burnley that locked him in?
Pretty much. I had Foden in all of my earlier drafts. Yep. He came in and out when he didn't start in the Community Shield game. Mm-hmm. That's when I started getting some cold feet. But until then, I'd always had him in. I like to have one option in midfield that is going to be slightly different to what everyone else has got. I mean, there were all of those 6.5 million options, obviously, for us, and I didn't quite know which one to go for, to be perfectly honest with you. And I was worried that going for the wrong one would mean that everyone would be hopping off them and jumping onto the other. I mean, if Matoma, for example, had not done too well this week and didn't next week for argument's sake, after Mbuemo's penalty today, we could have seen a drop in price for Matoma. Yeah. And I just thought, Foden is someone that he excites me. Yeah. I like watching him play, and I try to obviously go with what makes the most sense with the head, but the heart leads you sometimes, and it's a bit of a pity he didn't do too well. I'm going to stick with him for this next game week or 2, but he will be one of the ones that will be on the chopping block again. He's someone that was probably just going to be in there for that until that first wild card, just simply because you obviously can't rely on the minutes for him.
No, and it's nice to hear that in spite of the sort of talked around the, I guess, caution or pragmatism around your management style, that you still afford yourself some chance for a bit of romance there for players that you actually like. I'm here for it as well. Having watched him play last season in person, it's extraordinary just how fast that guy is, and I still think his ceiling is so high, and it's a nice price point. Absolutely. Yes, he didn't return in that particular fixture. That can happen, of course, but you can't begrudge the pick.
There could have been points in there for him.
Of course they could.
I think he was quite unlucky.
Yeah, me too. So do I, as a Phil Foden owner myself. Just want to talk around the double up in midfield for Man United there. So there was a lot of chat in the elite blog section on fantasyfootballfix.com, which I'm sure people will have read, around Bruno Fernandes or Marcus Rashford. You've opted for the double up now. We talked about how good Man United were defensively last season. Not super impressive in terms of the goals collectively as a team. Obviously, Rashford had a standout season in terms of his own individual returns. Do you see it changing much this season with the introduction of Rasmus Højlund and Mason Mount coming in and Ten Hag being a year into the project? Andrew, do you think it's going to be more cohesive and more goals in the Premier League for them than we saw last season?
I think Ten Hag is doing a lot of work trying to make them a better team in transition. Yeah. I think that's probably why he's gone for the likes of Mason Mount. And while Mason Mount is not the most amazing option from an FPL point of view, and I think sometimes he is sort of overhyped a little bit, he makes the team better.
Yeah.
And he does make those around him better, just with that, the way he can transition so quickly and the work that he does off the ball. So I do think that there are more goals in Man United. I mean, this again could be me thinking with my heart a little bit more than my head as a supporter, but it was those price points for those two that Rashford was always going to be in there. He's the main goal scorer playing as a midfielder and was only 9 million. Fernandes, again, I think I owned him for much of that last third of last season, and it was frustrating owning him because there were so many chances and so many times where he really should have got massive hauls. And I'm just hoping that kicks on a little bit this season and he can be that one getting all of those assists now.
His underlying numbers, which, the stats sandbox on Fix talks to, and you can look at the historical data, it was extraordinary, wasn't it? So many games, like you say, could have resulted in massive yields, couldn't they? So we'll see how that plays out. They've obviously got that nice early fixture run, not just the Wolves game tomorrow. So we'll see how that one plays out. We won't talk to Erling Haaland on captaincy because it does feel a ubiquitous pick there, Andrew. So I don't think there's any need to discuss him or the decision around that. But the Ollie Watkins pick there, 8 million price point. Just give me some thoughts around that and as to whether or not how you saw his performance in a tough game away at St James's. Obviously, they were very well beaten in terms of the scoreline. But what did you think of his performance and Aston Villa as a collective? And is he someone that you're expecting to be more of a long-term hold? What's the read on Ollie Watkins?
I was happy enough for having him, and I was happy enough with his game. What you say, as you say, a tough game, obviously at St James Park, but I think Villa can do very, very well. He looked very good with Diaby. The Buendia injury hurt him somewhat, but I'm quite happy holding on to him, and I think it's more so a lack of other options. Watkins is an easy drop down to someone like Jackson in game week 3 when Chelsea's fixtures turn. I didn't quite see enough of Jackson today to make me want to jump straight off, to be perfectly honest with you. I had Nkuku in part of my in a lot of my earlier drafts and just had to find that extra 0.5 million to go up to Watkins, just simply because there wasn't too many other options in that area. Pedro is one that hurt me, obviously. He was someone I was hoping would keep quiet this weekend. And if you had him, you must be smiling because he's got another 2 nice fixtures coming up. It's just the reason I went with Watkins and not him is really just that price point. And I didn't know what my exit strategy would be having Pedro in and having spent the money elsewhere.
I get
whether
that.
we still want Pedro from game week 4, I'm not entirely sure. I think 4 out of the next 5 or 6 are against your sort of Liverpools and
tough run, isn't it?
Cities, and they've got a bit of a tough run. That's not to say he won't do well, and but he did look lively.
He did look lively. He missed a very good chance.
He looked good.
A great price point as well. I do wonder as well, Andrew, as to they had this incredible season last season. They've got European football to accommodate at some point as well. And the attention on getting Ferguson minutes as well is, I think, only going to skyrocket, personally. I really do think, seeing the analysis yesterday on the British media and, the attention, as I say, that he's had on him already, do think that those game time between himself, João Pedro, Danny Welbeck, and various other options slightly deeper in the attack as well. For me, there's also the minute side to question, which with Ollie Watkins is not a concern, right?
Yeah, it's not too much of a problem. I mean, going back to the midfield is actually Diaby alongside Watkins, very, very good,
He did,
and someone I'll definitely be keeping an eye on going forward. It's just finding that space for him.
No kidding, no kidding. Another midfielder, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, out of my midfield there, I think it's probably. I mean, Foden will end up going. But next on the chopping block would probably be Bruno Fernandes if he doesn't come through nicely in the next game or two. So he's got some work to do.
Andrew, let's take a very, very quick look at how you're shaping up for game week 2. I want to get your thoughts around potential transfers. Obviously, time of recording is going to dictate a degree of caution, so I suspect the formation is not going to be a shock to people. But let's start turning our attentions ahead to game week 2. So this slide is going to look pretty familiar to people in terms of the personnel and the formation, i.e. it is identical to that which we've just seen, including the captaincy and the vice. Totally get it here. These are the fixtures that we've got ahead. I guess the first question, Andrew, is there any temptation to give Turner a run out ahead of Onana with Man United away at Spurs and Sheffield United looking pretty impotent in their first game, or is that just overcomplicating things?
No, there definitely is. It's something I'll be doing a bit of research on this coming week and having a look into it. I think it really just depends on what United look like in tomorrow night's game.
Yeah.
But more than happy putting an on a bench and giving Turner a go. I think usually rotating your keepers comes back to bite you. And
doesn't it? Yeah.
The reason I kind of went with Onana Turner is that I could, hopefully have a solid goalkeeper who can stick in there and rely on. But really just depends on how they do against Wolves. If we don't keep a clean sheet against Wolves, something I'll definitely be having a look at.
Interesting. Look, we're going to move on shortly to talk about Gabriel and your thoughts around him, and we've got some stats on some prospective options, so let's not talk about that. In terms of any other, not fires I guess, but any other thoughts around potential transfers, Andrew? I'm presuming there's no one on the chopping block for game week 2. Let's assume that Rashford and Fernandes come through unscathed and play well, so that they're not in the thought process. Are you a type of manager who would say best practice suggests you keep that transfer and have the 2 frees going into game week 3?
Yeah, absolutely. Never had any plans to make any changes bar any injuries or anything that went very wrong. There's obviously a concern for minutes with 1 or 2 of the players there, but I'm quite happy holding them for this week and going into game week 3 with 2 transfers. More than happy even taking a -4 little mini wild card and having a bit more information. We're only 1 game in, so obviously that second game just gives us so much more information and lets us know what things are actually like. And we'll get onto it when we chat about Gabriel, but it looks as if a lot more managers are looking at their team the same way Pep has for some time now, in the sense that their starting 11 is determined by their opposition, essentially. So it's going to be very, very difficult this season, I think, guessing certain managers, not just Pep now. You've obviously got Arteta thinking that way, and that Liverpool attacking side is just going to be a minefield in terms of who's actually going to start.
That is the voice of doom from FPL managers. Goodness me, trying to predict is what we are trying to do in this infernal game. But we'll keep at it. And if you are a West Ham fan like myself, then one thing you can say about David Moyes is you can rely on him in terms of his selection. He will wield out the same 11 every week, which actually does talk to your point about Areola starting in goal. Actually, I wasn't convinced at all that he would get the nod, but that does present, I guess, an option in terms of planning down the line potentially for that first wild card if people are looking to save some money if he does retain that jersey, which I would expect him to do. Anyway, we've threatened this for a while, Andrew. Let's take a little look now around the thoughts around Gabriel, who missed out for game week 1 in the home match against Nottingham Forest, came on for a late cameo and is now causing us a problem if you are an owner of him. So let's take a look at the options ahead of game week 2 in relation to Gabriel. Cool. So, I mean, this was kind of upsetting news. There was some Very late news on social media ahead of game week 1, if you were in the know, around on Friday evening. But for the vast majority of Gabriel owners, that wasn't information that came to light. So a lot of people, myself included, Andrew included, and I'm sure lots of people watching, rocked into game week 1 with Gabriel sitting there in defence. And lo and behold, he wasn't picked. It wasn't an injury as far as we know, and he was on the bench and came on for the last handful of minutes. So he was an Arsenal option, or is an Arsenal option at the time of recording at 5 million. Andrew, tell us, as FPL managers, what should we be doing in relation to Gabriel ahead of game week 2? Is it time to cut the losses and say he's clearly not in favour and get rid, or should we be holding him and see whether or not he gets his way back into the team?
I wouldn't be cutting the losses right now. I don't think I'd panic as an owner. It is worrying as a owner, don't get me wrong, because it obviously means that there will be certain games where Arteta decides that, you know, Gabriel's the man to sit on the bench to accommodate for a slightly different formation.
Yeah.
I think Arsenal personally didn't look too solid at the back, and I think they got bullied a little bit, especially towards the back end of the game, and I think that's why he was brought on. So I would expect Gabriel to play the next few, at least up until when most of us will be looking at using that first wild card. So as an owner, I'm not looking to sell right now.
Okay, it's encouraging. Yeah.
But there's a decision to made on that first wild card. It's, you know, who do we go to? And there are a few options on the screen here that we can chat about, and you know, options that we can move over to. I think looking at that first one, Henry, just before coming on here, I was actually having a little tinker on the website, the Fix website, and on the statistics page, and
good man.
Having a look at Henry's his heat map, his touch heat map, and his average positioning down the left-hand side, it really wasn't that much different to Chilwell. And if you had a look at Chilwell playing today against Liverpool, you know, we'll obviously get onto him there, but he looks like the defender to have. So Henry, I think, is a great option going forward. The fixtures, as we can see there, he's got Fulham away next, but Crystal Palace and Bournemouth both at home. After that, Newcastle obviously going to be a very tough one away at St James, but then he's got Everton again straight after that. So 3 out of those next 5 are home games, and home games where you would expect them to get at least 1 or 2 clean sheets out of those 3. So if you are a little bit spooked about Gabriel, you're not wanting that headache each week of going on and checking the team sheets an hour before and seeing whether he's actually starting, then I think Henry's possibly a good option going forward, and someone I'll be keeping an eye on for that first wild card if I don't get rid of him before then.
I love it. I should say these options are ones we come up at 3 subtly different price points, aren't they? So we've gone for the 4.5 million if you are looking to, I guess, save some money as part of this change. We've got one at 5 million, which you can talk to in a moment, Andrew and Saliba, and then Ben Chilwell a little bit more if you were frugal enough to keep some money in the bank ahead of game week 2 at 5.5 million. And the stats there in green you can see are the best in inverted commas. So I thought watching the Brentford game today, Andrew, that it's sort of a reminder just as to how legitimate a Premier League side they actually are. Actually, in terms of, you know, how they finished the campaign last time out and how they, you know, gave Spurs a tough game today. And I agree. You know, he looks like an attacking prospect, doesn't he, in that Brentford defensive line, and a nice selection of fixtures as well. So, in terms of the sideways move to Saliba, excuse me, what are your thoughts around that type of sideways move? And not just sideways in terms of the price, but actually internal within the same team. What do you think about that as a strategic approach?
It's very sideways, isn't it? I look, personally, it's not something I'm going to be looking at doing, just because I think it is very sideways and not going to make too much of a difference. I think Saliba is an option if you are a manager that likes to play very, very safe, and as I said earlier, don't want that headache of checking out the team sheets each time. The fact that it was Gabriel that made way and not Saliba in terms of Saturday's game and the formation and the change in formation that Arteta had means that he's probably a slightly safer pick. Although, I mean, I wouldn't expect there to be too much of a difference
Fair
in the
enough.
minutes played throughout the course of the season, to be fair. And Gabriel does just have that. He has that attacking threat, and
He
I think that's
does.
something else Arsenal missed in going forward in the dead ball situations, the corners, the free kicks. They didn't
Interesting.
really have that threat in the air that they usually have when they had Gabriel. Um, I mean, the corners weren't so great from Saka either. I'm not sure he'll stay on those for too long because they
Okay,
were pretty
interesting.
horrendous too. But
The
I
threat
think
that you were
I
talking
think
about,
they
Andrews.
need Gabriel.
Yeah, I mean, sorry to cut across you, but the threat that you mentioned, Corey Baker, who we had on last season and will be joining us again in future weeks as well, did talk to that as well. His observations from the game was just that they just didn't offer enough aerially, offensively. So the suggestion there would be that if they are looking to, if Arteta shares that opinion, then that would be a means by which to change that. And we do know that historically as well, Crystal Palace, who they play up next, will present that type of stern test in that regard as well. So I guess I can see where you're coming from in relation to potentially holding and certainly not advocating or championing that sideways. We talked about Ben Chilwell earlier on in the video, Andrew. How keen are you to get this guy on board? You've mentioned Chelsea's fixtures change. You mentioned game week 3. I'm a West Ham fan. I'm looking at that and thinking game week 2 is a-okay for him. So how keen are you to get Ben Chilwell? He did come off in the 89th, 90th minute. He did run off, so I'm not setting any alarm bells ringing there, but we know historically fitness has been a problem. Let's assume he's all good. Pochettino says he's fine for game week 2. What are you thinking? You want this guy straight in, or is it something you can hold off?
I do. If I had the 0.5 in the bank, I may be moving quickly off Ake to Chilwell, to be honest with you. I don't, though. Right. So it's something that's going to have to wait another week, unfortunately. Okay. But watching him today was scary as a non-owner. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people who obviously have him on the bench too, waiting to come on for that game week 3. And you know, hopefully fitness-wise, he's still with us then. I missed the last half of that game though, or the last half of the second half. But I did see James coming off though.
Yeah, James came off, and he's now their club or the captain as well. And his did look to be fitness related, no prognosis given. We started recording shortly after the game, so his did seem to be related to a potential fitness concern. Whereas Chilwell was right before the end, and like I say, did run off. It didn't look to be in any pain. He had a pretty heavy foul just prior to that, so don't want to set alarm bells ringing, guys, at all. Just an observation from the game, and I'm sure more information will come out during this week anyway. But yeah, I mean, sitting there, he was, and we saw it in pre-season as well, Andrew. He really was playing in that type of Marcus Alonso type role, really far advanced, and he was so close to scoring alongside his assist as well. So yeah, I totally get it. In terms of people who do have the 0.5 available, Andrew, would you understand and advocate for a Gabriel to Chilwell move? Do you think that makes sense?
Arsenal up next, so Crystal Palace away. Yeah, I think so. Look, I'm someone who right at the beginning of the season would prefer to have those 2 free transfers in game week 3. I think there's just so much more information that you're obviously getting double the information in that second week. So it's hard for me to say, not having that money myself, but it's something that if I was in that situation would definitely consider.
Okay. I think that gives people lots of food for thought, Andrew. So that's the advice there in relation to some potential replacements. But the overall strategic thinking is probably to hold and give him a chance to get back into this team and see whether or not he can cement his place ongoing. Andrew, it's been awesome to chat to you. I've really enjoyed it. I'm sure all of the viewers have as well. Is there anything else that you wanted to get across ahead of game week 2 that we haven't covered?
No, I think it's just don't panic. Yeah. I'm probably sitting, I mean, after this weekend's games and today's games, without having the likes of Salah today, Chilwell, I'm probably sitting somewhere between 1 million and 2 million. 3 players to play tomorrow night in a game that hopefully United will do well in. So hopefully I'll get closer to that million mark. But as I said, if you've set your team up nicely and you're patient, it's literally just one game week. 37 to go.
Don't panic, 37 to go. I love that as a closing statement to finish on. And guys, do please smash a like on the video, and do please drop a comment in below to welcome Andrew onto the series. I'm sure we'll get him back on super soon to talk about how he's progressing in the hunt for another top 10k overall rank, which I'm sure is very much in the offing. Guys, do please head over to fantasyfootballfix.com and subscribe as well. And do subscribe to this YouTube channel as we try and get ahead to 40,000 subscribers as soon as we possibly can. It's great to be back, guys. Don't panic. 37 still to go. I'll be back with you for game week 2, looking ahead to game week 3 next week. I hope the game week has gone well already, and you get all the points you possibly can in the Man United Wolves game as well. Without further ado though, guys, I'll see you next week. Bye bye.